Hello, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. We have another client success story today, and I know you guys love these. So check out the others if you haven't already. We've got quite a few going, and just a reminder, if you're a client, you've worked with me and you want to share your story as well, I would love to have you on. Get in touch. But going back, we've had Tori on episode 183. We're going to link these in the show notes as well if you specifically want to check out this client series. Tori overcame her period, hormone, and gut health issues, and she was a practicing student at the time, and now she is a nutritional therapist, and she's doing really great. We've had Kayla on episode 215. She overcame an infertility diagnosis and later had two babies despite having PCOS. Jasmine, episode 219, she is a yoga and breathwork practitioner, somatic therapist who found deeper levels of healing through mineral balancing, lab testing, working on her gut health. We've had Natasha on, who is a life and business coach. She also had a PCOS diagnosis and fell pregnant first try. And now we have the lovely Kresser Jackson on, who is going to tell you more about her story. And she worked with me at the end of 2020, and she is going to tell you more about that. And she dealt with quite a few issues that she didn't really know were present. She just wasn't feeling optimal. And then we discovered what was going on and subsequently worked on all of those things. So can't wait to share that with you. But just some exciting news. If you are a practitioner or you're a student, you want to get into the naturopathic coaching world, holistic coaching, whether you're an acupuncturist or health coach, nutritional therapist, I am so excited. You might have heard me talk on social media, but I'm launching a practitioner mentorship program in January 2025. And I can't wait for this. This is like an exciting new thing for me. I have been doing mentoring sessions one-to-one for years now. So definitely know what I'm talking about, but I've not done it in a group setting yet. And it's going to be the first run of it in January. So it's going to be how to find soul-aligned clients like I do, with clients who are willing to do the work. They get amazing results and they want to share that with other people. You love working with them. You build a successful coaching business. You know more advanced recommendations for clients who just seem to be stuck and you're not really sure, like, whether it's emotional, you don't know how to coach people properly. It's going to be perfect for you if you want to learn a little bit more about those things. And the best deal and best value is going to be within this first cohort. So don't miss out. There are going to be limited spaces, and stay tuned. You'll hear me talk more about that on social media and on emails, but it's coming very, very soon. And if there is the website up, I'm going to pop that in the show notes. I'm currently working on it, but it might be up by the time this episode is out. So on to the episode. Kresser Jackson is a Kresser Institute trained health coach and an oxygen advantaged breath coach. Her role is to work alongside you to establish and achieve health and wellness goals. Catherine has worked in the health and wellness industry for over 20 years, but ironically discovered her own health challenges despite feeling pretty good through functional lab testing, which then showed things like hormone disruption, poor energy, poor bone health. And this led her to understand female physiology to a greater extent and on a whole nother level. She is one of the experts at Rooted Life, an online hub offering in-person and online events. They are passionate about supporting your vitality through the core principles of connection to yourself, nature, and others. So in this episode, Catherine very openly and vulnerably shares her story. And like I said, she went for a long time actually feeling pretty good. And it might have been that she didn't really have many symptoms at the time because she was on the birth control pill, or it could have been that she just got used to feeling a little bit depleted, a little bit tired, a little bit sluggish. That can happen quite commonly. So Catherine shares her struggle specifically with amenorrhea, missing periods. So she was on the pill from her late teens or early 20s for a number of years, over 10 years. And when she came off the pill at age 30, she actually didn't get a period back for 8 years. And she went to her doctors, she went to her specialist, gynecologist, and was basically told things like, you're in premature ovarian failure, it's not going to happen for you. Basically, you're kind of in menopause and your periods have just disappeared. And she kind of knew that that wasn't the full truth and she had some other symptoms going on. And she decided to work with me at the end of 2020. And within 12 to 18 months, she regained her cycle. And it took a few months to get the second one back, but since then, it has been a regular cycle. And I just knew from the get-go when we had that very first consultation that it was completely possible. And this is the power of having a coach, someone to support you, someone to motivate you. And I just wasn't going to give up on her. And I knew that having a menstrual cycle was such a huge importance to health. And it's also a sign of health too. So when she was going to her conventional doctors, they were just asking, like, do you want kids or not? Because if not, then there's nothing really to worry about, which is just ridiculous with what we know about bone health and mental health and just longevity. Having those natural hormones in the body and having that cyclical nature as a woman is just so powerful. So yeah, we eventually got her cycle back. So you can learn in the episode like what were some of the things that we did. The benefits she saw. So not only did she have missing periods, she also had signs of fat malabsorption when we did stool testing. She had some big mineral imbalances, and she did a private DEXA scan, which is a bone scan. And she actually found out that her bone health wasn't great, and she was actually in the osteoporotic stages because she'd not had a regular menstrual cycle for years and years. So remember that even when you're on the birth control pill, you're not having a regular cycle. So she'd not had one since she was about 17, 18. And at this point, she was 37 or so. So she is, working on that still. I think that's another condition that can be reversed and improved. I don't know if she's had a recent test, I'll have to ask her, but we even discovered on a mineral test, really interestingly, that she had a lot of calcium, and we know that that's important for bone health, but it was actually building up in the wrong places. So rather than it being stored in her skeletal system where it should be for adequate bone health, it was building up in the soft tissue. She also had low electrolyte levels. She had sluggish thyroid function that nobody had picked up on. And after getting her on some good thyroid support, after working on her mineral balance, after supporting her adrenals, her electrolytes, and so much more, she went on to, improve her hormone health and her energy, and so many things improved. So we talk all about that, what we tried, what she believes made the biggest difference. And this just shows, even as a practitioner, as a qualified coach, having someone else to turn to. And I do work a lot with students and practitioners. I'm kind of the coach for coaches, if you will. And we, can often miss really important things because when it comes to our own health, we can't see the wood for the trees. So Catherine talked all about her journey, how it was working with me, and she had really positive things to say, which is lovely. And then we do get on to Catherine's speciality in optimal breathing. I don't want to say breath work because it's a little bit different to what you might think of with breath work, but it's just the optimal way to breathe, which you might think is snooze fest, so boring. But I was like absolutely fascinated with what she was saying, and we talk about like what does it look like to breathe optimally, and why is this so important? And spoiler alert, it is extremely important for all things healing, nervous system regulation, hormone health, recovering from burnout. Even if you're into working out and performance and you're an athlete, it can be very beneficial. And she shares a few valuable little bits of wisdom in the episode too. So she trained with a company called Oxygen Advantage, and very kindly she did a little group session with my other clients. So within my one-to-one program, you also get access to the Hormone Reset Library, which is packed with over 25 hours of gold. It's like a gold mine of information. There's loads of stuff on mindset in there. There are even a couple of workouts. There's sleep masterclasses, trauma masterclasses, and now within that lives Catherine's workshop that we did the week of recording the podcast too. So we've collaborated a little bit. We've not had a session together in a few years because she's doing good. But if you want access to that, then that's within my one-to-one hormone reset package and that lifetime access you get to the library. So don't feel like you missed out. You can still access that. All of the links to Catherine's work, my work, even the practitioner mentorship program will be in the show notes, but I won't leave you any longer because this is quite a long episode, but trust me, it is worth it. And I just can't wait for you to hear what Catherine has to say. So enjoy. Hello, Catherine. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I just like having this as a little catch up for us as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah,
We've
we
not caught
chat
up in a
by
while.
email, but we've not had a proper call in a while. So I just love to follow along with what you're doing as well. And this week, actually, but when we're recording, you're collaborating with my other clients. So you have been a client of mine and you're a practitioner yourself. So in my little client community, you're hosting a lovely breath coaching session with them. And I do want to talk about that today. Like, why are you so into the breath? I used to think it was such a weird thing, like, what even is that? And now I'm obsessed with all things breathing and doing proper breathwork sessions. I used to think that I wasn't a good candidate for it, but it's actually that I needed it probably more than anyone. But to
Mm.
begin, I do want to talk more about your health and your journey and what you experienced working with me as a client. I'd like to do episodes like this to maybe share if someone's listening and they're considering working with a practitioner. They are struggling with maybe symptoms that you had, and they're like, oh, that isn't normal, or I can do something about that. So it's just nice to have a resource like this to share, and then hopefully people make some changes and you can heal from a lot of different things as you well know. So you signed up to work with me back at the end of 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago. I obviously know what was going on around that time and your health history, but if you can share with the listeners more about your health and what eventually led to you signing up to work with me back in 2020, like go in as much detail as you would like.
Cool. Yeah, so I ironically spent most of my life feeling like I was fairly healthy. I was always like into health, let's say. Health and fitness. I guess I started on I played football. I was really into um just yeah, exercise, sport, loved it all. And so I studied in that and then ended up working in that domain, sort of realized that I was more into the sort of the health side of things rather than fitness. So that sort of took me on a slightly different path. Um, Even then started doing some sort of on the side education because I'd always loved listening to Chris Kresser, who's into the functional health space, and he did a health coach course, so I signed up for that. So like most of my life, I was kind of like buoyantly going along, feeling like I'm pretty healthy. Probably been a bit of a victim of like trends and things like that, and I think that bit me in the bum a little bit at a few points that we'll sort of come back to. And it was really ironic that during my health coach course, it felt like everyone else had like a story. And I was like, oh, I haven't got a story. Like where do I focus my attention? Because I'm kind of like, I love it all. I love all the information. I love like helping all the different various groups. Um, and that's when really it started to become apparent that I wasn't as healthy as I thought. Because I came off the pill. I'd been on the pill like a lot of people since my teenage years because I had really painful periods. Um, Came off the pill expecting my period to sort of come back at some point, and I kind of had been warned, if you like, about the fact that they might come back as they were, like quite painful, but as it was, they just didn't even come back. So sort of probably about a year went by until I went back to my doctor, and then my doctor did a little test for like the hormone levels, and the hormone levels were all really low, showing me to be sort of in postmenopausal ranges. Um,
How old were you at this point?
I think I was around 31, so I'm 10 years post that now. Um, so I didn't get a great deal of interest really from the GP um, because basically they asked me the question of like, are you interested in having kids? Like, and I was like, not really sure. Like, it didn't feel like it was a viable option at that point. So it didn't feel like a realistic choice that, me and my husband were gonna really chat about when I had no reproductive cycle for um, most of my life. So I was really like liaising with a friend of mine who was like a former NHS GP that was going into the functional sort of GP world, functional doctor space. And Um, she was very concerned about that. She sort of expressed concern about things like cardiovascular health, bone health. If my hormones have been here since I've been like on the pill, then, I've not had all of the benefits of like my endogenous hormones, like cycling each month. So things like bone health, etc. So she really sort of got me to push for like a bone scan, DEXA scan. So about 3 years later, I managed to get that, showing me to be in the osteoporotic range. She also did some like gut testing that wasn't very good. Did the Dutch test as well. Again, showing me to have like basically not very much in the way of any sort of hormone. Like quite high cortisol, poor clearance of cortisol. So yeah, I'm starting to like get this laundry list of all the things, all the problems. Um, and it was kind of interesting in that like I felt pretty good for the most part. Felt pretty good. I was running at that point and playing football, and like from a performance side of things, like I was generally feeling pretty good. And it was only sort of latterly, I was working for sort of 7 or 8 years, and at some point I got your help. But I was working a lot for myself, trying to like read all the things. So I'd kind of been diagnosed with, on one bit of paper, like premature ovarian insufficiency, and then someone else had mentioned hypothalamic amenorrhea. So I wasn't really sure where I was in terms of what is the actual like diagnosis that I've got. But the more I understood about hypothalamic amenorrhea, the more I felt like that was the thing. And even like sort of subsequently again, like definitely feeling like I was well, they used to call it female athlete triad, but like the REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. So those things were sort of coming through as the things that I needed to address. And I think I heard you do a podcast with Nicole, what's her surname?
She
Yeah,
specializes in hypothalamic amenorrhea.
yes.
Yeah.
And she's got a book as
Mhm.
well. And I think I'd read I ended up reading the book, and there was lots of client examples, and I think I was like listening to every podcast that either she'd done or like had a title of hypothalamic amenorrhea in there, listening to all the stories, and I didn't hear anyone that had had like missing periods for as long as I did. So partly why I kind of was keen to sort of share what happened to me on this, because it kind of gave me probably a little bit of a limited belief of whether I could actually get my cycle back. Like at the end of the day, I've not had my sort of normal cycle, a proper cycle, since I was like probably about 17. So I was at this point maybe like 35, so nearly 20 years. And as I said, I'd come off the pill at around 30. So I was getting on for like 5, 6 years into that. I tried to like increase like my calorie intake, and I'd always been interested in health. So I remember there was a little contention on the podcast you did with her, because I think her mantra is very much like just eat all the things. Whereas you would like, well, you could actually go for the healthier
Yeah, that was like
way of
quite
doing that.
early on into the podcast, and it was the first time that I was disagreeing with the person
Yeah.
on, and I felt bad because I'd invited her on, and I was really interested. And I never got like a formal diagnosis of HA, but
Mm,
I feel like I had a split between PCOS and HA because I'd gone through periods of overtraining that initially triggered my amenorrhea, but then it kind of got tied into inflammation and insulin resistance, and I wasn't absorbing my food properly because of gut health issues. So it's like it's kind of sounds like both PCOS and HA, they can go alongside each other quite commonly. So
mm,
yeah, for those who aren't familiar with HA, it can be the general term is like loss of period due to stress. And the stress can be overtraining, under eating, sometimes like mental and emotional stress as well, but it can affect athletes or just people who love exercise and are health conscious, because that might mean that you changing your diet to eat more fruits and vegetables, you might cut carbohydrates and then you just naturally start eating less calories in general or carbs. So yeah, it on that episode, I agreed with some of the things and I loved having the general information. But I feel like I said on the episode, I don't really agree that you just need to eat all the pizza and ice cream and just get calories in wherever you can because you might get your period back, but then you're left with insulin resistance and yeast overgrowth as a result. So there is a healthier way to do it, and you can eat healthy foods in the calorie surplus that you need. You also don't need to just lay on the couch and not do any exercise. You can still be active. And so hers was very like black or white, and I've just not seen that work clinically so
Mm,
great. And I mean, everyone can do what they want to do, but yeah, I don't want to fix one issue and then have them with three other things.
mm,
And I've had good success with myself and with clients now, regaining the cycle. And we do want to get away from this orthorexia, this I have to eat everything clean and perfect. It's not about that. It's just about
mm,
nourish my body. I want to eat nutrient dense foods. I want to be mindful of my blood sugar and yeah, have the occasional treat here and there. But I don't want to feel absolutely awful when I'm trying to put this weight back on or regain my cycle. I want to feel like I'm healthy and supporting my health in other ways too.
mm.
Yeah, I've left the
Yeah.
episode up. I was like, should I take this down? But
Yeah.
like yourself find me who some people wouldn't agree with me. But
Mm.
then some people know that that just intuitively feels like the path that they want to go down as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely that, like you say, was me. And like you say, I took a lot from her stuff. She's done a lot for, like you say, the awareness of the HA and as I say, it was like interesting reading the book with lots of client examples and things like that. So like you say, there's always like a little bit of difference of opinion and whatnot. But the like you say, the overarching thing was like when I was reflecting, I had been very probably like orthorexic in lots of ways. And as I say, more so just following like health trends of like, intermittent fasting was being spoken about and still is without any sort of caveat to the more sort of I guess nuanced way of maybe approaching it when you're someone who's really active and when you're female as well. Um, so yeah, I was probably doing a bit too much like kind of an extreme version of that for the exercise that I was doing and don't get me wrong, like I wasn't like I love exercise, but I wasn't doing like loads. And that's the other, I guess, misconception about something like REDS, that sort of energy deficiency that contributes to the sort of hypothalamic amenorrhea, is that you have to be, you know, stick thin and underweight. I wasn't like no one would have said I was underweight or a concerning sort of looking sort of gauntness or anything like that. It was I'd probably over a period of like a year maybe lost like a stone, but I'm not very my build is more like of an ectomorph build, so I'd lost like body fat but also like muscle mass importantly, and it was within a certain time frame, and as I say I was then prolonging that time that I just ended up feeling good when I had a coffee, no breakfast, and went out for a run. And that run could be a 5K, or it could end up being, go to the hills and do like more like a 10-mile type run. And I felt amazing. As I say, like, and I think this is the other thing that's really difficult about it is that initially, like, your performance can be really good because you've obviously lost a little bit of weight and for running particularly, which
Stress hormones
obviously
as well. The adrenaline can feel really good.
yes, I think that's the other thing. Yeah, yeah, the adrenaline is like an amazing like drug in a way. Like, and so when you sort of come off of that and you do kind of crash a little bit of like you feel all the aches and pains in your body and you feel tired. Like I remember then going through a period where once I was starting to address this and really focus on everything that was going to support more like a sort of a parasympathetic state and pulling away some of those like major stresses that I was like causing myself with under eating and sort of like overtraining, especially doing like fasted training and things like that, then yeah, in the mornings, like I think my sort of cortisol was not giving me the spike, or it certainly wasn't coming through and making me feel good in that morning period. So I just was like, how on earth did I used to get out of bed and
But that
do
could
like
cause
an
people to feel
exercise
like panic,
class?
can't they? Because they think, oh, I must be healthier when I'm doing that because I have more energy.
Yeah,
Or I feel better when I exercise every single day and do fasted cardio. Uh,
yeah,
but the energy crash that you're having, that is your true energy state.
yeah,
The other
yeah,
one
yeah.
is like a false benefit that you're receiving.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And I think the more then I sort of like started to gain this awareness, like I was like, yeah, my sleep's been crap for ages. Like I've been getting up in the night like two, three times for the toilet, which was never the case like um for the most part of my life, but it just crept in and then became the normal thing that I just needed a wee like every night. And that one of the first things that noticeably changed when we worked together. Um so I mean I listened to quite a few of your podcasts before deciding um to work with you. And I think for me, like and I think the world of like there's lots of different ways that you can go now, and I think a lot of people do appreciate that there's more than just the NHS route now. There is loads of out there, but it is really difficult navigating that world of like all the different practitioners and the names they have, and ultimately nobody agrees on one particular way of doing things, like one particular diet or anything. So you want to then work with someone who's aligning with your sort of values and mentality around it. And yeah, I just found with the way that you spoke that you weren't necessarily sort of dogmatic about one particular way of doing things. Um, Very supportive of the whole picture. So it wasn't just about like nutrition, it was about, considering the nervous system. And I don't feel like there was a lot of people, certainly at the time, like kind of talking about that. Um, yeah, so I think those were the major things. I listened to that podcast you'd done early doors with like Lisa Hendrickson Jack as well, and found her podcast and felt like that again, like completely made sense to me as well. So
Vital Sign talks about the importance of having a period and a menstrual cycle, even if you
mm,
never want kids. Like
yeah,
it's such a sign and creator of health every single month that we should be having. And it's so easy for doctors to be like, oh, it's just early menopause, ovarian failure, these things happen randomly to unlucky people, and not delve in any further and think of how many people out there would just take that, accept that as, okay, this is my life, this is my fate. And I think just deep down knew that that wasn't right, or even just to help your other symptoms. And then your period, spoiler alert, did come back as like a side benefit of all the extra things that you were doing. So do you remember how soon it was into working together that you got your cycle, and how long would that have been like that you didn't have one? Like how many years?
So I think it was about 18 months working together, and I think in total, like coming off the pill, it was 8 years
Mm.
until I got it back. So as I say, I'd never heard anyone on a podcast or seen any examples in books of anyone going for that length of time. So I was just a little bit like, it might not be possible here. And I think like that was something else that you particularly were like go out and get yourself like some like period products because like
Yeah,
you need to
that's it. I
believe.
definitely bring in the woo-woo side of it, but I I feel like just from session one, you were telling me this, and I feel like your confidence about the whole situation was a little bit low. I just had no doubt that your period would come back.
Mm,
You're not in the menopausal years, and I believe that premature ovarian failure just is like the IBS diagnosis. We don't know what's wrong.
mm,
Bad luck, sorry. Like just live with what you've got. But I just had that confidence, and I feel like that's important as well as a practitioner. It's not that I'm like faking it and just trying to positive think our way through and gaslight you. It's no, I truly believe like the body can heal from this, and
mm,
even though maybe the stories that you're hearing is people like myself, 2 years off the pill, and that's quite a still a long time. But after that, like you said, you don't really hear of many people saying 5, 6, 7 years without. So I'm glad that you're sharing your story because if there's someone else out there, even just one person, imagine they're
Mhm.
like, oh, it's possible for me as well. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. And I was looking back before we hit record just on the lab test that we did and what we discovered as like the underlying root causes. And you said you were happy to share some of them. So I think I reviewed the labs that you'd already done, and then I think we did a few more, like the mineral test, HTMA. We found that you had a very common imbalance called the calcium shell with low electrolytes and low minerals like zinc as well, which for something like osteoporosis, there is that estrogen connection. So that probably was a risk factor, you not having a proper menstrual cycle for that long. But there's so many other things, and we just are taught, and doctors make us believe that for bone health, calcium is the only important thing, and we just need to take calcium carbonate, which is basically chalk, and take that every day without the cofactors, without looking at vitamin D, how much time you're spending in the sun, what's going on with inflammation in the body. Is your body even processing the calcium? Because in your body it wasn't, it was building up in the wrong places. So rather than
Mm.
it being stored in the skeletal system, where 99.9% of it should be, yours was building up in the soft tissue, which can be linked to low thyroid function, which was another thing that we identified. The elevated thyroid antibodies, so there were signs of Hashimoto's, autoimmune thyroid, and just your T3 level that can also go alongside hypothalamic amenorrhea and missing periods, because there's hormone hierarchy. So people focus on the sex hormones, but that's like the tip of the iceberg. They're the things that cause us bother, the missing periods, the painful periods, the acne, PMS. But what's under the surface is things like minerals, thyroid function, and your metabolism, stress, and adrenal health. So we were going right back to those things. So yeah, you came to me for hormone health, but then we started to investigate your gut. We found some imbalances in the gut. We found fat malabsorption, which is really key as well with sex hormone production. You need cholesterol to actually build estrogen, progesterone, and then the low white blood cell count, I think, was a symptom of poor gut health, and just some dysbiosis going on in the gut, things like parasite infections, bacterial overgrowths. So I know you probably went from like not knowing at all what was going on to like here are 10 imbalances that we're going to work on. Do you
Mm.
remember the session that we like went through everything and how you were feeling at the time? Were you like, this is great, or were you slightly overwhelmed?
Vaguely, I mean, it's a long time ago, but I know sort of like generally at this point, as I say, I'd spent most of my life feeling that I was pretty good health-wise. Like, and part of that is probably the simplistic way we often look at health, and certainly even when I look back at my own like education, like fitness, and sort of really weight, is kind of or was very much like considered to be two key pillars of health. Um, obviously we're better than that now in terms of our thinking. Sometimes it's hard to change that old way of thinking. But we know its health is much broader than that. And, I just felt like I was like scoring good on lots of things. Like I'd worked within private healthcare and done health assessments whereby I got to do my own tests and they were all always like really good and blah blah blah. And then suddenly I was getting all rubbish results and it was like a real yeah, it was a real hit to the morale, generally the self-confidence, probably a little bit deeper than that, even like identity, because
Like imposter
I had
syndrome, like who am I to be in this field when I've got all of these issues going on?
yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So it's and again, it's one of those things where it's good in the long term because like it made me really look at that picture of like identity and who I am and actually have a sort of deeper understanding of that versus it just being associated to, you know, how I was performing, like running wise or football wise or whatever. But yeah, so I do remember feeling like not great in that session, in that like it was just like,
Hmm.
oh crikey, like there's so much.
Ego.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, oh gosh, like
But I had
something else is
solutions.
wrong.
So we at least had things to work on, and
Yeah.
I deal with these imbalances all day, every day, so I knew exactly what to do. But it can be a bit overwhelming when I'm like, okay, we need to work on this, 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 and I just want clients to have some understanding as to what's going on in their body, but I don't need
Mm.
them to understand the complex intricacies of like everything and how everything's connected together. But yeah, we definitely found some things that we needed to work on. And after working on those, obviously you got your period back, which was a huge, huge deal. And we had a little period party celebration because of that. It's a big moment. It's like getting your period for the very first time again.
Oh gosh,
And then
so weird.
I think your health just when that happened, that was like, okay, we're in a good place. But then
Mm.
it's going to take several months, sometimes several years, to then benefit from those sex hormones being at a good level and just giving it time then to have a knock-on effect on bone health and thyroid function. So yeah, I feel
Mm.
like just that was like a big, big moment, but not the end. Like, okay, we've done now. We've reached your goal, which we didn't really like. You might not have thought was even possible to begin with. But health is definitely a lifelong process, and it's not like you've reached your destination and then you just stay there. It's that we always have to work on it, but usually not in as much depth as in the beginning phases. You're not going to need as many supplements. You're not going to be as strict with your nutrition or your bedtime and things like that, your morning routines. You can be a little bit more flexible. Um, so yeah, how have the last few years been? Like after that point of getting your cycle back, maybe like end of 2021, early 2022. Do you remember when it was?
Mm.
It was like Christmas time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Christmas time. Yeah, well remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my little niece's birthday, so
Oh,
I always remember the date
yeah,
now, like 2 days before Christmas.
yeah.
So yeah, and I remember my husband was away, so I remember phoning him up, and then I actually got a bit emotional. I was like,
Yeah, it's a big,
um,
big deal.
oh, it was like you say, like it was one of those things where, like, because you'd encouraged it, I was trying to, really believe it. Um, but ultimately, like when it came, I was like, oh my word, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like you kind of forewarned me really on, it didn't then come again till like the May. So,
Hmm.
there was 5 months pass
Hmm.
before I got my next one. But then after that, it was pretty much monthly, which I'd never, when I'd had my periods for the few years before being put on the pill, it was never regular. It basically never like settled down. Like obviously again, like now I read about a lot of these things, like it can take like 7 years to sort of get into that regular cycle. So I'd certainly not got there. I was sort of like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, like oh, just all over the place. So to actually have then like a fairly regular cycle, and also because I'd just been like reading all the things, listening to all the things, as say Lisa Hendrickson Jack, who talks about using your monthly cycle as a bit of a window into your health. Like I was so interested in all that stuff. So I was almost like, it would be incredible if I can get my cycle back so I can actually start to
Hmm.
tune into these things that
Yeah.
she's talking about. Because I,
I
I
feel like you're left out of a cool
yeah,
story, don't you?
yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, it was amazing then to start to sort of be able to like listen and understand a little bit more to my body, and I guess that's what the way that I've tried to continue really is just like understanding more about my body and understanding like not just about the cycle, but like much more broadly. Like I'm so interested, like probably a lot of people listening, like in health and physiology, and you can get like so caught up, especially when you've got problems to try and resolve in like read it. Like it's endless, isn't it? The information that we've got like at our
So
fingertips. So
conflicted as well.
it's understanding like I've definitely been on the side of like just information bombardment and then just feeling like, oh my word, like where do I take it? And that was partly again like a real important part of like my um health journey or whatever in terms of like electing to see you is that then you sort of take a little bit of that sort of pressure off because otherwise you read the next book and then you're like, oh, well, now I need to do this. And then you're flipping and changing all the time the types of things that you're doing. And ultimately, there's probably many ways to get to your sort of point where you're trying to get to. But if you're flicking and changing between the two and a bit stressed about all the different things, like trying to do all the things, because then you'll end up on about 100 supplements, then equally, it's probably making the thing harder. So it was nice to have like a confidence in like this is the next stage of the plan, like
Yeah.
execute it basically,
Just
and
focus on
it made
this
me
to the
much
best of your
better.
ability and
Mm,
crowd out the noise. I very commonly
yeah,
ban my clients from Facebook groups, definitely no
yeah.
go to any Facebook groups. But even like how many practitioners to follow, how many social media
Mm,
accounts, like maybe instead of a health, even my podcast, like instead of
mm,
this, maybe the best thing for you is to listen to a comedy podcast for a little
mm.
bit or read a fiction book. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, watch a little bit of TV instead of scrolling on like Reddit forums about health.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're laughing as well because we've been there. But like for me, I knew that what I needed was, like you say, a bit more quiet and a bit more like trying to ignite a little bit more intuition. Because again, like looking back on a time of probably living in sympathetic dominance for a long time, I'd not realized that, even though, as I say, with my job, I was talking about the autonomic nervous system every day, measuring like HRV with clients every day. And I'd not acknowledged it for myself. And equally, like, friends and family wouldn't have identified it either. So just really understanding, what kind of things I might have been able to tune into at that time, um, to acknowledge that that's where I was. As I say, the sleep was a big part of it, but there was lots of things like, I would get like agitated. I'd also get like a lot of like cravings, like late at night for food, like particular like carbs, and like I think that was when I'd messed about with my food like so much that I was just kind of under eating, but also my blood sugar like regulation was just all over the place. Like again, potentially partly with like stress and things like that. So through I think both working with you and as I say the health coach course that I was doing with the Kresser Institute, there was a big component of that that was around like meditation, quiet time, as I say, understanding like your values, your strengths, like more about like who you are, which unfortunately we just don't really do any of that sort of inner work naturally through our education or a lot of like, parents and things like that. Um it's not like something that people tend to do. Again, probably something that is a bit more on people's radar. And now I know like some of my friends who are parents and they're pretty good with some bits like that because they've sort of gone on their own little journeys in that respect. Um, so I was always still reading and listening and whatnot to podcasts, but I was definitely doing a better job in having some quiet time, having some time to look inward, and it kind of then correlated with doing more in relation to like the breathwork side of things.
I even did a post on Instagram the other day and it was like, are you that friend who is like the most health conscious, but in the worst health? I'm like, how ironic is that? The people who are like trying the best with food and
Mm,
doing all the supplements, and then there's other family members who are just like never taking a supplement in their life, and you're like, how are you alive?
mm, yeah.
How are you still standing? And then they'll say things like, oh, just eat normally. Like maybe it's all this stuff that's making you worse. And there's maybe a tiny bit of truth in that. But it's not like we have to completely ditch all of our healthy habits. It might just be that we need to back off and just
Mm,
kind of take it a little bit more easy and find the things that do make the biggest difference for you. And then anything that you're unsure about, anything that's like, I don't even know why I'm doing this or if it's working, scrap that stuff and really
mm.
getting back to, yeah, your intuition. Have you found that as you got your menstrual cycle back, you've been able to like tap into that feminine intuition. I definitely felt that for myself. Like I would start dreaming more. I was told as a
Mm,
child I was very intuitive and like I've been here before and all of that, like an old soul. But when my health was bad, when I was on the pill, when I didn't have a period for 2 years, I'd never felt more disconnected from my body.
mm. No, completely agree. Yeah, like um, I've heard someone describe it as like it was almost like the world was in like black and white and then came
Mm.
into color, sort of like coming off of the pill. And I don't feel like it was that dramatic for me because um, obviously I immediately didn't regain my health. I had to sort of do more like proactive steps rather than just sort of remove the pill. Um, and I think because the one that I was on was in the end like the progestin only one, which from what I understand has some qualities that make us a bit more likely to be in that sort of sympathetic dominant state as well. And so I definitely felt that, like you say, that sort of more um well, a greater um sense of like my emotions and
Hmm.
just yeah, like I guess that's probably a female quality particular is that greater understanding of how different emotions sort of make us feel and just yeah, being able to like enjoy stuff more, like yeah, have all my experiencing is sort of like heightened in terms of like how you experience them like from an emotional point of view. So there's definitely things that improved. As I say, it wasn't as probably dramatic for me just in terms of I needed to get to that point rather than simply get off the pill. I'd been on the pill for a long time, and as I say, probably um doing my body a bit of a disservice during that time because I had no insight into lose like had I not been on the pill, I'd have been able to see that I would have lost my periods
Hmm.
um because I would have had
Yeah,
that
it's
indicator,
fascinating
but I
thing.
didn't have that.
And people can sometimes think their health gets worse after stopping the pill. It's like with the fasting thing, like they feel worse when they start
Mm,
eating breakfast and stop doing the cardio, they feel more tired. Or when they come off the pill, they start getting digestive issues and their skin starts going crazy. But that again is your true state. That's what's going
mm,
on, and what you're experiencing when you're on the pill is a band-aid. It's
mm,
just masking things, and you're just on this set level of hormones every day. You're more in this masculine 24-hour cycle as opposed to the feminine 28-day-ish cycles, where we do feel different one week to the next, one day to the next. And we yeah, we can require different self-care and little shifts with our exercise. So yeah, coming off the pill, I'm sure you agree, was one of the best things I've ever done.
oh yeah, no, for definite. And I just I mean coming back to probably that question is that once I have got my cycles back regularly, the as is often anticipated, the problem that I had way back when I was 16, 17 has come back. I have got, painful periods that I'm often sick with. And so, the ability to have that insight into that is a problem with my body. So I'm just masking that. And although, I know for some people, they will find that the only solution to the issue, but I'm completely against now going back there, even though, I'm obviously working now to try and improve this that I think is probably endometriosis, um, through again different now sort of approaches within lifestyle. But I can't imagine ever electing to go back on the pill at this point because I want to know that that problem is still there or I've managed to sort of resolve it. And that's my now indicator is that I've still got work to do. And as I say, I'm sort of working on that and I guess proof that health is never finished, done and dusted,
Mhm.
ticked off, and you
Yeah.
can move
Well, I
on to
think
something
like
else.
after what you went through with the pill and just having that trust now in your body that you can
Mm,
overcome this as well. And
massively, yeah.
I don't think
That
your body would have even been able to start healing until you got your cycle back. So I know it
mm,
feels like it's been this huge journey, but I would count like the day you got your period back, which was a couple of years ago, that was like day one.
mm,
Because before that, if when you're on the pill, like your body wouldn't be able to heal all this stuff. So endometriosis is another condition that you're going to have the genetics for. If it even is that, it sounds likely to be the case. But it's more of something that you can't get rid of the genes for, but you have massive control over things like your estrogen detoxification and making sure that your thyroid function and your minerals are in good place. And then you can get to a place where you have pain-free cycles and it doesn't really impact your day-to-day life. But if you go off track with that, it's like your warning light on the car that comes on.
Mm,
So you have a
yeah.
bad cycle and you're like, okay, what's going on in my life? And looking at that holistically as well, there is a structural aspect, which I know you're looking into, emotional aspect. So I think it's just going to be another like learning curve for you as a practitioner. Sometimes we're just like, when is this ending? When can
Yeah.
I just have no symptoms? But it will all benefit you in future. You'll be like, okay, I needed to go through that to help
Mm.
my clients maybe help someone else who's dealing with the same thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you mentioned a big thing there, like the trust in your body. Like it's easy when you've been diagnosed with any sort of long-term health condition or you just suffering with something that is very much an ongoing issue, is that it can become part of you. And it, as I say, it can be the thing that you're researching all the time. And it's really difficult to get that balance of like that is how I approach stuff, is to research it, to understand it better. However, um, I don't want to become so, like endometriosis. Like I'm Catherine, and yes, I'm having
Agenda
some issues
warrior
with.
on your Instagram profile.
Yeah. So I like you say, take a lot of confidence in, like you say, that big, um, I guess, step forward in my health when I got the period back, like showing how incredible the body is after everything that I've, inadvertently done to it, but I've done to it nonetheless that is it wasn't ideal, and potentially really harmful, but my body still was able to return to like what is like more optimal function, um, 20 odd years later. And I believe the same thing. Like I've had, some cycles where pain hasn't been a problem, and therefore I have confidence that I
Mhm.
will be able to know which toggles and whatnot are the important
Just because
ones to
it's on a
pull
bit
and
of a
just,
delay, it's not always like
yeah,
directly the month after. So it
yeah.
just takes time to understand and trial and error certain things. But as long as it's trending towards
Mm,
majority good periods, you know you're on a good track.
yeah,
The fact
yeah,
that it's
yeah.
not every single cycle is a really good sign.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it makes it, like you say, it's not obvious, but it's also then trying to tune into like other subtle signs of like often with endometriosis, for example, this gut issues, SIBO, those kind of things. So can I sort of really pick up on some subtle things that, help me to understand when that's better? Because a lot of people do correlate much better cycles with much better sort of gut health. So yeah, that's a work in progress. Hopefully
Mm.
I'll be back again on the
Yeah,
podcast at
we'll be
some point
hearing the
to
updates on what made the
share
biggest
my
difference for
solutions.
Catherine in 6 months' time, a year's time. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while now, you've probably heard me talking about the importance of minerals. I know that you're trying to balance your hormones, detox your liver, heal your gut, but minerals are actually key for these things to happen. They really are the spark plugs of the body. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that unless you're working on mineral balancing, you're probably not going to see results when it comes to things like energy, skin, digestion, and period problems. So many of us are mineral deficient or imbalanced these days due to soil depletion, chronic stress, poor gut health, medication usage, and big mistakes that I see clients making is supplementing in the wrong way and following intense healing practices. Trying to DIY your health with self-supplementation, restricted diets, and crazy detoxes can actually throw your mineral levels out of whack. It's important to know which specific minerals you have to determine the treatment that you need, and that's exactly why I created my mineral balancing course, I'm Balanced, so that you can get your hands on my favorite functional lab test, the hair tissue mineral analysis. Yes, this can be done from anywhere in the world. Here's what you get in this program: one complimentary HDMA test, over 8 hours of video education, helping you to understand your unique lab results and exactly what you need to do to balance things naturally, plus the tools to support you and your family long term with a deeper understanding of minerals. All this is just £447, including the lab test. Then long term, you can just purchase additional tests for yourself and your loved ones, because this is a test that I recommend everyone does 1 to 2 times a year to make sure you're staying as balanced as possible. You could get started today with your hair sample and have answers within a few weeks once the results come back. Get instant access to the course material by clicking the link in the episode show notes. And yeah, I'd love to know like what were the things that we did together that you feel made the biggest difference. So you're saying like your sleep improved, you obviously got your
Mm.
cycle back. It could be a combination of everything. Like we did a lot of things over the years, but were there any standout things where you're like, yes, this made a big difference working on this or taking this, doing this with my diet?
Mm. I like you say it's a while ago, so I'll probably forget some detail, but I definitely always felt like the magnesium was really important for me. Taking the magnesium, and I remember having a few little bits, like I had a sty on my eye, like, and I often got the little flickering with my eye as well, and that seemed to help to resolve that. So just even just like little subtle signs that you don't always probably know like which mineral's going to be deficient to show that, but certainly once I'd got things sort of more back on track, then those little things that had just not been major, but little things that had never happened before um, were improving. And I
Those are the
think the
things to pay
magnesium,
attention to, aren't they? Those are the
yeah,
little whispers and nudges from the body, and then before it starts screaming at you with bigger conditions.
yeah, and they become normal, like a bit like the sleep thing. They become normal to you, and so it's so hard to sometimes remember when they actually started or what have you. But then suddenly you go, oh yeah, I haven't had that in a while because it's like quite an intermittent thing. But that certainly seemed to correlate with, as I say, the magnesium was a big thing that, and then I think that helped a lot with my sleep. The magnesium. Um, otherwise,
I think the work on the fat malabsorption probably
mm,
had a big impact just because of how
yeah.
integral that is for even like fat soluble vitamin absorption and that how that improves the immune system, supporting your detoxification. If your bile flow was really stagnant, which it can be after years of being on the pill, these hormones can interfere and they can make it more thick and sludgy. So you wouldn't have been detoxifying properly. So you get a
Mm,
buildup of environmental toxins, or things like estrogen. If you have endometriosis, then having gallbladder issues is just going to make that 10 times worse. So, yeah, that was something that was kind of working on in the background, but I do see that impacting like literally everything in
mm.
there. And then the other one was the thyroid support, the thyroid glandular.
Yes, yes, no,
Big
that's
one
right.
too.
Yeah. I think that made me like more regular with bowel movements as well, because it wasn't all the time, but there was lots of missed days where I wouldn't go for a bowel movement. So I think that was really helpful. And like you say, obviously a real obvious one in terms of detoxification.
Mhm.
And I also was thinking then like just even having breakfast within an hour of getting up and making sure I'd have just even something to eat before like going out for a walk or run or what have you. That like over time, it took a bit of time, but all those combined things, like as I say, I was like having like a smoothie, like I remember late into the evening because I was literally just feeling like so like craving like sort of sugars, carbohydrates. So I think maybe there was a combination of things there, but certainly getting everything much more stable in terms of like having especially like some protein at breakfast and improving my overall like blood sugar regulation and probably improving like my cortisol levels.
Mhm.
Um, all just then meant that even though I was like at one point sort of thinking, I remember thinking like, have I like developed like some sort of eating disorder? Like I was literally just like craving it so much that it felt like it was overtaking me. It wasn't just a like, oh, shall I have this? Oh, I'm bored. Like it was like a real difficult thing to stop doing. But over time, that just sort of went without necessarily and like an intentional strategy to do that. And as I say, looking back, I definitely think all those things were really helpful in just in sort of making that something of the past.
So some pretty simple things, but I mean, when your blood sugar's regulated, when you're having a bowel movement every day at least once, and you're sleeping better, like your health is gonna be transformed just from those things. Then there
Yeah.
was like little individual things along the way based on your labs. But yeah, I would agree those are the top things. So I am so happy that you shared your story, and hopefully it just shows people that it doesn't have to be these crazy life changes where you just transform everything overnight. It's just like change this and do a little bit of this and take these set of supplements. And healing is possible. And
Mm.
yeah, it's this ongoing process, like you said. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then I would love to talk more about your expertise in the breath world. Am I right that you were already doing that before this? So when you were saying that you were coaching clients, you were already trained in breath, in the Oxygen Advantage breath coaching? Was that before or
Yeah, I think it
during
was
all of
like
it?
2021 or 22 that I trained in the Oxygen Advantage. Um, Obviously, I'd done quite a bit of sort of breath work, I guess, in some guys because I'd worked with HeartMath.
Mhm.
So they look at like very much how, the breath links with the nervous system intimately, and using the cadence breath of 6 breaths per minute cycle to improve like coherence and sort of very much our physiology quite holistically, and our brain function. They focus a lot on how that influences areas of the brain that are lit up. And, when we're looking at, particularly the corporate world, focus, attention, work productivity, all those kind of things is kind of the focus of the HeartMath technology and the breath cycle. Um, but then, yeah, in being introduced to the Oxygen Advantage, that was ironically through my husband, who sort of never listened to me in relation to my health stuff, but he
Difficult.
suddenly got interested in breath. And then he was like telling me stuff, and I was like, yeah, I knew that. I've done stuff in
Told you
health
3 years
before.
ago.
Yeah. I think I actually told you, but now you're telling
Yeah.
me. So yeah, so his kind of story, I guess, was like he was a rugby player. He got a concussion that ended his career because he got a bleed on the brain, and it was like an accumulation of concussions. He'd had some quite bad concussions through his um, rugby career, and it culminated in, as I say, very bad sort of like post-concussive symptoms that lasted for like, well, more obviously like 6 months, but actually beyond that, like now that we sort of again reflect back. And when he sort of was looking at the breath and doing the little assessments that we do as part of the Oxygen Advantage, it was telling him that he was um, very poor at breathing. And it turns out that often if we've had like a massive like brain injury like that, or it could be another way, like obviously that was concussion, but like stroke or anything like that, sometimes it affects the brainstem, which impacts our breathing, and it doesn't seem to often just revert back to normal, even if you manage to get, you regain your health, sort of, or you feel like you've regained your health otherwise. So he's like realized that this is maybe a little indicator that he's still got work to do, and started to learn about it. And because he's very um dedicated in whatever he gets into, he literally dived into it like full 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 beans. So he then, as I say, starting to tell me stuff, and actually then once he's doing the course of the Oxygen Advantage, starting to tell me stuff that I didn't know and I didn't appreciate. And so, like, as I say, I'd been in probably like the health wellness space for like 20 years at that point, and I was like, oh right, okay. So I ended up doing the course as well. It was really helpful. I was still working, doing health assessments using the HeartMath tool, and actually it was really helpful to explain the people that didn't necessarily feel great. Like we were literally able to give a window into the autonomic nervous system real time on the HeartMath, to sort of show that actually, when you're doing this five in, 5 out sort of breathing cadence, then it takes you into this nice like coherent zone, which is like autonomic nervous system sort of balance, like that optimal place to be. Um, but that would be maybe 85% of people that we saw. And then some people would really struggle with doing that 5 in, 5 out cadence. And because the Oxygen Advantage looks at um the sort of, well, looks at the sort of biomechanics of breathing, so the actual like what's moving, how we actually breathing physically. It also looks at like the biochemistry, so the impact of how carbon dioxide in particular has an influence on our breathing, because that's our main breathing stimulant, or stimulus, sorry. And then also the sort of psychophysiology sort of effect. So when we feel like we're suffocating or what have you, or we feel stressed, then it impacts our breathing. So how we deal with that, and all of those three factors will play a part in terms of how well we're breathing, and ultimately then how we're feeling with that type of breath that is our normal or auto.
Wow. Are you still doing the heart math? No.
We do use it, yeah, yeah. So
So is
it's
that like
quite
a little
useful.
monitor?
Sorry.
Is that a monitor that you put on, or is it
It's
like
just a little
yeah?
a clip that gets your pulse and obviously HRV from your
Yeah.
earlobe. So yeah, it's a really nice, like obviously a lot of people have got watches, but that collates your historic HRV. And so you can see your general trends over time, which is definitely quite helpful. I don't use anything like that. But the heart math is really good sometimes for clients, especially clients where and particularly in the, say, the health assessment space. I was dealing with a lot of corporate, often men of the sort of 40 to 60-year-old sort of category, and a bit like you'd said before, they were a bit like breathing, like
Mhm.
really. And so actually
Stubborn and closed-minded, we can call them.
and that definitely changed over the time I was there. Like, as I say, I think just the awareness to things that we perhaps not considered as important, and maybe like you say, a bit woo woo, but actually very grounded in science now, it turns out.
And when they
Um,
see the difference, they'll be like, oh, I can actually feel it within minutes.
Yeah, and it's that thing that kind of like I was referring to before of my own personal experiences, that we don't often feel that we're in that sympathetic space. It's not always like, steam coming out your ears and you're red in the face, that when we think of fight or flight, we think of that extreme example of it. Whereas, you know, I know you've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but that sort of low level chronic state of sympathetic dominance often goes under the radar because it's more subtle, because it's, crept on like it did for me, and maybe has got more subtle, as say, indicators into that as well. So they can, you sat there and you can see in front of you that actually just sat there talking to me, that you're actually into the sympathetic, sort of more sympathetic category, and so you're kind of like, oh, I don't feel too bad, and then you do the cadence breathing, and then you see that you get into this more coherent state, and that it's super simple as well. Like, and there's pros and cons, isn't there, to obviously these technologies, but it can be, I think, like a gateway into a bit more like introspection, as in like, and how do we feel, not only like just looking at the screen as to like, where am I, where is it plotting me, but actually like, how do I feel with this, and actually just understanding that part of it, and hopefully, like you say, helping that sort of mind body connection, so that we are a little bit more connected to our body.
So what would you say is an optimal HRV? And like what is HRV indicating?
Say that again, sorry.
What's an optimal HRV range? Like what are you aiming for?
Well, you see, with
It's gonna be different to something like an Aura ring.
yeah, so with as I say, with the heart math, you're looking for 0.1 hertz, which is
Okay.
like that optimal range of like, you've got some sympathetic activation, because often we talk about it and you kind of get this picture often that fight or flight and sympathetic activation is a bad thing, but we need some level, because like you say, often when we sort of come out of sympathetic dominance and go into parasympathetic, then we feel exhausted, knackered, all the things, because like you say, we start to actually feel that, and so that, especially what we're looking for there, is that sort of getting into the zone, that ability to get into that like optimal area of focus, concentration, like just say that sort of calm, cool, collected sort of place. So that was what that was looking at. And from what I understand, like HRV wise, when I work with people that have got watches and things like that, I try and stay away from what's good, what's bad, and just because from what I understand, it's more about what's your norm, and then can we improve that? So yeah, I don't think, from what I understand, that we know enough to give actual criteria for people across the board. Because obviously, like with things like trauma now, like people who've had like adverse experiences in childhood, we know that their HRV is generally sort of lower. But if we can pick it up, they're gonna likely feel a little bit better. So yeah, so that's my understanding. So I'll always work with like what's the client getting at the moment. Like I worked with a lady who had post-concussive syndrome, and she's now getting to the baseline level that she was prior to the concussion. So for her, she starts to feel, she's already feeling better, doing everything sort of in terms of indicators that she felt like she's getting less and less of those. So that seems to be for her the thing is to get back to what her norm was. And if you don't have that data, you're just trying to build up a better level of HRV.
I think that breath, like the way that you breathe, is the most important thing for nervous system regulation. But are there any other tools, like for your clients, that you help them to be more in that parasympathetic state? Are there any like general recommendations? Are there any favorite like forms of movement or activities that you've seen time and time again to really work for a lot of people?
Like gratitude is one of the most powerful like emotional states. If we can get into um that state of gratitude and awe, for sure. So like with that, like nature is also super important. So um like it's really hard to say like the what, because the how is so important, if that makes sense. So like for example, if someone goes to like a yoga class, like on paper that's really helpful for HRV and your nervous system regulation. However, if they're like literally going in there thinking like, oh crap, this is a waste of time, I need to get back and do the washing, then obviously that's not going to have so much of a beneficial impact. And so I think that comes down to like, what I'll often more so discuss is like what types of movement are really like do you find enjoyable? And if you can mix that in with like, because I always think of like the foundations of our nervous system is it's obviously we're wanting to create a picture of safety for our brain. And so like you say, the breath is super important because we're breathing all the time, and we can be either breathing in a way that makes the brain think that we're in a fight or flight situation, i.e. we're mouth breathing, we're panting, we're upper chest breathing. That would all signal to the brain that we're in a fight or flight situation. Or we can be diaphragmatically breathing, it can be super calm, and that obviously has a quite a direct impact on the heart rate as well. So obviously then you've got two of those internal factors feeding back up to the brain to say that yeah, we're all good. And then from I guess like an evolutionary standpoint, potentially, that like the social side that again I know that you've talked about a lot, like, and that was again something that I remember you saying. You were like, let your hair down, just go out and spend some time with your friends, have a laugh. And so like laughing, being, as I say, being with friends, like good friends, having those relationships where you feel like people get you and you feel like alive with those people, you feel yourself with those people, like that is super important. Um, and then nature, we're designed to be in nature, like that was our natural habitat. And so there's so many bits of research that show that like when we're living sort of apart from nature, as we do, like I'm not going to live in the woods, but I like, we generally have to be very intentional about spending time in nature for a lot of us, because we can easily just pop to the car to get to work, to come back, and then especially these months that we're in now in the UK where it's quite dark outside, and the light hours are the hours that we're working, so it's a case of trying to work out how we can navigate some time in nature. And even better if we can like directly contact the earth as well. So again, like grounding is shown to be really helpful for HRV. So some of those things that are, I think, really super fundamental. And as I say, speaking about the sort of the emotional side of like different emotions carry us into those different states as well. So as I say, laughter, joy, peace, and also emphasizing that our body like is capable to deal with stress. It has that system to deal with stress. So it's not like stress is like, as I say, bad. Like as long as we're like doing all the things to try and recover from our stresses, then we can deal with that. And even things like excitement and those kind of higher energy emotions are like sympathetically like quite high driven states, and we don't want to get rid of like excitement.
Probably not. Yeah, we want to stress our body a little bit sometimes, even with exercise. That
Yeah,
tipping point, there's too much exercise, or sometimes it's
yeah,
not that you're doing too much, it's that you're not recovering enough.
yeah.
I think of athletes, their top priority is recovery, and they will focus like so much on the sleep and the nutrition, not just the race that they're running in or the workout they did that day. They know the importance of letting the body rebuild, and that is
Mm,
where the growth happens. So if you're just like not nourishing your body properly, or you're not prioritizing sleep, often, yeah, people who are athletes and look physically ripped and fit, and the personal trainers, they can be in some of the worst health
mm,
states. So there's a difference between athletic performance and health.
yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you can have both. You can be fit and good within your workouts and good at recovery, and also have the health. You don't have to pick between the two.
Mhm.
We don't want to be scared of exercise. We don't want to be scared of stress.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's probably something that I not necessarily scared of exercise, but I'm always conscious that
Mm.
probably like doing too much running, maybe the high intensity running, like running is obviously how we would have escaped most dangers. So that Nicola, I think she's called Rinaldi, isn't
Yeah,
she?
yeah, that's it.
She talks about that, and actually it makes sense to me that, running particularly is for the body what we would have done in a fight or flight situation. So for some people, they struggle sometimes to get their period back when they're doing a lot of running. Now that's where, for me, like the breath work came in to an extent. I did try and vary my exercise, so I tried to do things like yoga. Got into like doing like some dancing as well, like because I do think like particularly who is it? Bessel van der Kolk, isn't it?
Mhm.
The he wrote the book The Body That Keeps the Score, talks about how like cultures through the years have done things like singing together, dancing. And when you think about dancing, it's such a freedom of movement. So like when we go to the gym and do something structured, we're controlling our body to do a particular movement pattern. Whereas dancing, you're just kind of letting, if you can get to that state of letting your body be dictated by the movement, and like it's so freeing for your body. Like I love like just doing that as a break, like at home, obviously. Like I wouldn't be quite so relaxed if there's anyone there. But that's just a real, I think, for a lot of people who work at home and things like that, it's a nice, easy one. And I can't remember where I was going that. Oh, yeah. So with the running, that was it. With the running, like I love running, and it's a way to get out and it's a way to explore. So what I did was then train myself to nasal run. And that's something else that we talk about with the oxygen advantage, is like the exercise component of breathing. Sort of look at the how we're breathing sort of day to day, like 99.9% of the time when we're unconscious of our breathing. So we want to improve that element, but we also want to, for some people at least, like when they're looking at performance, impact our performance, because even when we're, if you like, really optimally breathing at rest, sometimes a stress, obviously exercise being a stressor, can provoke a more of a upper chest fast sort of panting breath that then takes us very much into that sympathetic zone. So if I like in my head, in theory, do my running nasally and keep my breathing calm, I'm much more in that sort of more sort of happy zone of like you're always going to be to an extent sympathetically quite highly driven when you're doing something like running. But I was running at a pace that allowed me to nasal breathe, and therefore I had to slow down my pace. There was nothing related then to times. I was just purely focused on like going out, enjoying what I did enjoy at the end of the day about running, which was that it took me out in the fresh air. Like, and I felt nicely warm. And as I say, I was then able to work on the nasal breathing. And nasal breathing sometimes gets kind of just the headline, but it's not all about just the nasal. It's like being able to diaphragmatically breathe, and as I say, breathe calm as well. Like if you're literally like running nasally, and it's like like a snot fest and that kind of thing, then it's not necessarily probably going to be relaxing and safety promoting, parasympathetic promoting within your body either.
So can you show us, can you spend the next minute or so maybe just doing a little tutorial of how our breath should be the majority of the time? So obviously not exercising, maybe just as we're working, or if we can just catch ourselves and just check in with our breath, make sure we're breathing this way. Um, I'm sure there's caveats if you have a deviated septum or like a condition, but yeah, just a minute or so if you could do a little
Hmm.
tutorial of what we should be aiming for.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And obviously, you mentioned like deviated septum. A lot of people do end up finding that even if they've got structural damage, like, as I say, a lot of like rugby players, um, then they do actually find that they can breathe through their nose. But just, yeah, just to, because you'd mentioned it, like, it's a use it or lose it organ. So if you're someone who generally sort of mouth breathes, which I do think was me, like, then your nose gets congested, so that then initially it's quite difficult to nasally breathe. But that's just your body like responding to it and making sure that we're not getting any sort of germs up there. But if we're nasally breathing, then we will start to clear out that, because we've got, like, in our nose we've got nitric oxide being produced, which is a vasodilator, so it helps to open up those airways, like not only at the site of the nose but then down into the lungs as well. So it really supports healthy breathing in a couple of ways. It's a like an antifungal and antiviral and antibacterial, so it's part of our immune system essentially. Whereas the mouth contains very little amounts of nitric oxide. So if we're breathing in and out of our nose, which I've sort of alluded to as part of the picture of optimal breathing, then it really helps to support, as I say, that sort of protection of the lungs because of that nitric oxide sort of system, but also the filtration system that the nose has. It allows like the air to be warmed and humidified. So like most people have probably got the or had the experience of going out in the cold, and especially if you're exercising, breathing in quickly, like your lungs feeling a little bit of that sort of like tightness because of like taking in some really cold, dry air. Like your lungs do not like cold, dry air, and therefore, if we're breathing in through the nose and allowing for that warming, the humidifying of the air, it sort of spins through the turbinates and then allows it to get into the lungs. Then again, we're protecting the lungs and giving it a better opportunity to expand. Because what we want is our air to go to the bottom of the lungs. So again, alluded to that sort of upper chest breathing isn't optimal in terms of our efficiency because the little alveoli, so often it's taking people back to biology at high school, this, but they're the little sacs that are at the end of the sort of the tubes in the lungs, that's where oxygen transfer takes place into the bloodstream. So we want the air to be going low down into our lungs to get the opportunity to get into our bloodstream. So in and out the nose. So if we're listening to this now, you can start to think about, am I doing that in and out the nose? So the nose like provides 50% more resistance versus the mouth, which is obviously a bit more of a gaping hole. And whilst that sometimes sounds like a bad thing, it's a good thing because we want to take the air in slower, because if we're breathing slower, then our nervous system again gets that signal that we're safe. And then on the way out as well, if we're getting less air out and it's slower, we're offloading less carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is our main trigger to breathe, but has also some really important roles within the body. So we often, like I always learned that carbon dioxide was a waste gas, but carbon dioxide really helps to vasodilate the blood vessels, so it helps a lot with circulation, and it's the primary sort of catalyst for oxygen to get into the tissues. So obviously when we're breathing, we're getting oxygen into the lungs as a first step, then we need to get it into the bloodstream to be transported through to the body's tissues wherever we need that oxygen for energy production. And then the third step is that it offloads from the hemoglobin, the red blood cells in the blood where it's being carried over into the body's tissues, so the brain cells and the muscle cells, etc. And the presence of carbon dioxide really allows for that to happen. So it causes the blood to be a bit more acidic, and so it can, as I say, get over and offload into the tissues. So the fact that we're breathing out through the nose just means that we're offloading less of that carbon dioxide. For most of us, what we work on within the oxygen advantage is actually building up our normal CO2 levels, our carbon dioxide levels, because a lot of the time, if we're over breathing, which is often characterized by, as I say, mouth breathing, because we take in more, but also we offload more, then we're offloading more carbon dioxide, and then we end up with a lower level of carbon dioxide as our sort of norm. And so we don't necessarily get some of those benefits. So we sometimes get poor circulation in hands and feet. And also it impacts our brain circulation as well. So we can, by holding more CO2 in, improve our circulation to the brain. So you certainly, again, get that effect when you're exercising and breathing through the nose. So in and out through the nose. Tongue position is another important one. The resting position of the tongue should be at the roof of the mouth. And that provides like integrity to because it's essentially like an extension of the airway. And that's some musculature that's kept open to allow for air to pass in and out. So if the tongue muscle is in the roof of the mouth where it's supposed to be, it just gives that integrity to the airway, which is particularly important when we're sleeping. So often, like when we're on our back and our tongue falls backwards, then it sort of allows that airway to collapse a little bit. So we get a little bit of restriction there. So it's the position often described like when you say that word letter N, or do the clip clop sound like the. So there should be a slight bit of suction from the tongue at the top of the mouth. And then that sort of following it down also then both connects into the use of the diaphragm as well. So typically when we're breathing in and out through the nose, it helps us to utilize the diaphragm, which is the muscle sat at the bottom of the lungs, and that contracts, sort of drawing down to expand the ribs outwards, creating basically increased volume, less pressure, so that the air goes from an area of high pressure to low pressure, so it comes into the lungs, and as I say, draws it down into that area where we want it at the alveoli for the oxygen transfer to take place. The diaphragm also has got some other helpful components, like it's a spine stabilizer. So the fact that we're breathing using the diaphragm means that we're getting some more better core stability. It also I know you've had Perry Nicholson on the podcast, it's almost like a pump for the lymphatic system and helps to sort of massage all the organs below it, which are obviously the digestive organs. So using the diaphragm should be our normal breathing. So if we put all of those things together, so in and out through the nose, ideally it should be soft and quiet. So just if you feel like
my nose is whistling. Trying to move away from the mic. Oh, it's gone.
Yeah. So tongue to the roof of the mouth, in and out of the nose, making it so soft that you can't, ideally, if there was someone in the room, they wouldn't be able to hear you breathe. But also, ideally, get to that point where it's not even audible for yourself. So it's so soft and gentle. And then you can, for thinking about the diaphragmatic activation, just pop your fingers on the lower ribs. So often at the sides, you're feeling around the front, but also around the back, because the ribs connecting at the spine as well. So it's actually like when you sort of feel the lower ribs, you're like, wow, that's quite far down. So the lungs do go quite far down, and that's, as I say, those lower rib areas are where the diaphragm's attaching as well. So when we take our in-breath, we should be expanding, feeling some expansion through the ribs. And ideally it would be 360. And you can almost give a little bit of a prod, don't kill yourself, but just give you a little bit of a prod at the front, at the side, and also at the back. Just because when we have that sensory input, it's quite useful for the brain to understand, this is where the diaphragm is. This is what's going to be starting to expand. So on the in-breath, a bit of expansion, and on the out-breath, a bit of retraction. You can make those breaths bigger to try and feel that, but when we make it bigger, what we want to do is slow the breath down, because obviously if we make it bigger but keep the pace up, then we're going to be over breathing, and as I say, that will then connect to like more sympathetic tone, but also it will breathe out a lot of carbon dioxide and want to keep as much carbon dioxide in. So when we're breathing gently and slowly, which is, let's say, characterized by that quietness, then again we're tending to find that we keep that carbon dioxide in. And we know that even just the activity, that focus on your breath, usually reduces our pace by about 20%. So when we become intentional about our breath, we are naturally slowing it down.
We hear about mindfulness, so this is like the most mindful practice, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Rather
we're
than like just
getting,
staring out a window, like let's do a double whammy and incorporate the breath and actually
yeah,
like relax the nervous system in this very proven way.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And as I say, like it allows you to connect with your body a little bit as well. Because like you say, most of the time, for most of the day, we're thinking about other things and everything's like externally focused, whereas just sort of like giving a bit of focus to the breath. Do you feel that expansion in
Yeah,
the, yeah,
yeah.
cool.
And I do Pilates as well, so they do talk about the breath a lot, which I really like. It might be slightly different to what's recommended here, but yeah, I feel like my instructor she'll talk about the breath, and then I always feel like when I put my hands there, it just helps me to like connect a lot more.
Yeah.
So many people are scared, Catherine, of connecting to their body.
Mm,
They'll just
yeah.
like taking that moment to go inwards or not have constant distractions. That's what they're scared of. But if that's you, then you need breath work and this mindful practice more than anyone.
Yeah, and there's light ways to go like make the transition as well. Because like you say, like it's really interesting again, like um the guy actually who was teaching us like the mindful element on the health coach course, he talks about like he worked a lot with like teenagers that had got into trouble, etc. So he was doing a lot of like charity work, and so again, probably a lot of people with some early like adverse events in their life, and he said that they often really struggled to focus into the torso particularly. So he would then take the attention out of the torso like first and sort of just breathe, like try and breathe into your big toe, or like or be drawing like a star and like breathe in, breathe out, and like sort of like maybe pace that like sort of 5 in, 5 out type cadence with it. So yeah, so I get that there are like definitely, like you say, people that have genuine sort of triggers when they're trying to focus on like the torso. So like you say, you've got other ways to then make sure that you can still like focus on the breath and like try and optimize your breath, but like not necessarily go straight there first. But yeah, like you say, for most people, just that sort of simple practice of ensuring that we're connecting to the diaphragm. And if you struggle with like being seated doing that and you can't really feel that diaphragm expansion, then just lie down with your feet flat on the floor, so your knees bent, because then that takes the diaphragm out of that job of having to stabilize the midline. And so it can just really help people sort of connect with um, the diaphragm. And there's little bits and bobs as well that we can or we'll focus on when we go into the group, but like things like a nose unblocking drill and things like that for people who feel like they're a little bit sort of congested. So like it's really interesting. Like often people talk about doing, diaphragmatic breaths as a bit of a calming exercise, but really we should be diaphragmatically breathing all the time. It's our breathing muscle. So then we get that like advantageous element of it, like as I say, having that lymphatic pump there, and also it's where like the vagus nerve like passes through it as well. So again, we get a little bit more vagal activation, which is associated with more parasympathetic activation. So ideally, that should be our background sort of track for the most part, so that we can help stay balanced. And then it might be worth just mentioning one little exercise that's really helpful for being a tool. So like obviously we're trying to change the auto so that our nervous system is more balanced and we're getting all the extra benefits of better oxygen delivery and more CO2, etc. Also, because we know of that link with the nervous system, the breath is a really useful tool to sort of intervene when we are feeling like we're quite sympathetically activated in the moment. So for example, people tend to hyperventilate in that sort of scenario, and the classic example of that is like a panic attack. So we'll be breathing big, often breathing in and out through the mouth, and often breathing sort of into the upper chest. And when that gets rid of all our CO2, the oxygen delivery isn't happening quite as well. So you'll put a pulse oximeter on someone and they'll be still at like 99%. So they've got lots of oxygen in because they're breathing loads. However, because we've lost all that CO2 and the acidity that's allowing that oxygen to offload to the tissues, then they might be feeling a little bit lightheaded, a little bit tingly in hands and feet, those kinds of symptoms. So there's really effective exercise often that once we start to feel that sort of like panicky or as I say, that just heightened state of arousal, we can just put in a few pauses. So we do normally like 2 or 3 normal breaths and then a pause of like usually about sort of 2 or 3 seconds. Like it'd be, as I say, it's not a hold, it's just a really sort of light pause. Even just like a 1 second pause is fine. So going through that, so normal breathing, couple of, a little pause, normal breathing, a little pause. So as I say, normal breathing for 2 or 3 breaths and then a little pause, usually anywhere between like 1 and 5 seconds. But as I say, usually if you're quite heightened in terms of your arousal, you can only manage like a 1 second pause. But that should help to start to downregulate you and help you to feel calm. That's the main thing with that. And we're just basically helping to reduce the overall amount that we're breathing, but also just retain a little bit more carbon dioxide so that we get that nice little effect of the calming nature of carbon dioxide and the improved oxygen delivery.
Wow, so fascinating. I've just been, yeah, with what I've learned from breath work, I used to be so scared of it, especially just like connecting to the body again and slowing down, just going from this like fast-paced, more masculine lifestyle to like, oh, let's just tune in. But it has
Mm.
been one of the most effective things that I've ever done. And yeah, I'm sure there's so much more we want to cover. And we could talk for the next 3 hours about breath work. I would love that. But you're coming into my one-to-one community this week. Obviously, it would have already happened, but this will be available as a replay. And this workshop that Catherine's doing in my hormone reset library. So if you're a one-to-one, you're going to get access to that. But obviously, you're available to work with. And yeah, if you want to be coached a little bit more on the breath and make sure you're doing the right thing, then Catherine is available for that too. Are you available for a few more questions before we finish up?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We'll do quick fire.
yeah.
So, question one, what's something that you're into lately? So, it could be health related, could be completely random.
Uh, Probably like going out in the hills because I've moved to North Wales and it's beautiful and you can't get enough of it.
A bit picturesque views, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Well, when it's not, we're not in
Oh,
the
yeah,
clouds,
not
but yeah.
miserable and
Yeah.
grey. Question two, what is your favorite product or gadget or supplement? Just one thing you couldn't live without.
Uh, I love a sauna.
Yeah, same.
I love the
We don't
heat.
like cold stuff over here.
I actually do love going in the because we've got the
Oh,
lakes
your
here.
hormones don't love it.
But well, it loves it when it knows it's got a sauna afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's much
perfect.
easier.
Amazing. What is one piece of takeaway advice? So it could be something to do with like your health journey, something coming from like a health coach, a practitioner, or something to do with the breath, something that you want to leave people with.
Um, from I guess what we've talked about, it's like have space without the inputs. So yeah, whether that's out walking or just doing some breath work, whatever it is, but yeah, just taking a break from consuming information.
More necessarily always isn't necessarily better when it comes to health. Sometimes we need to remove
Hmm.
these 15 health practices that we're doing. And ironically, your health can actually get better as a
Yeah.
result. And then the very last question is where can people find you? So website, if you're on social media, and what you're offering at the moment.
So rootedlife.co.uk is the main avenue through which I work. Don't do loads of social media stuff, but you can contact me through Rooted Life. And I do a Monday night little breath work, like literally sort of like 15 minutes max. It's free. So if you go onto the rootedlife.co.uk website, you can access the Zoom link for that. And it's designed to literally be like, you don't have to put your camera on, you don't have to interact with the computer so much or your phone or what have you. It's just designed to be a little like space, basically the space that I needed. So I just guide you through some simple breathing for, as I say, 10 to 15 minutes, and you can, as I say, stay cameras off and whatnot. So yeah, I invite you to do that.
Love that. I'll put all of that in the show notes, your website, where people can find you. And if they have questions, yeah, they can email you and get in touch. Well, that was quite the episode. We've gone a long time, but we had a lot to chat about the health journey, where you're at now, just us catching up, and then your breath coaching. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being so vulnerable, sharing your health story. I just know it's going to help so many people. And even if one person starts to work on the breath, we will both be happy with that. They start to pay attention and be more mindful about the way that they're breathing. And that was something that I didn't even realize the importance of. It wasn't something that we were taught in college. I knew the importance of stress management, but there were times that I didn't think I was stressed, but the way that I was breathing and just I got used to feeling that way and living in that sympathetic dominant
Mm,
state. So yeah, thank you for being here today. And I can't wait to share this with everyone. And I'm sure we will connect again very soon. Thanks,
yeah,
Catherine.
good to see you, Vivian.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would love for you to leave me a rating and review on your podcast app, as this helps to support the show and it allows it to reach more people with this valuable information. Come and say hi over on Instagram. I'm at Viva Natural Health. And if you haven't already, check out my website, vivanaturalhealth.co.uk, for tons more free resources and to discover how I could support you further. I currently offer one-on-one consultation packages if you want my top level support, then more affordable group programs and self-paced online courses. So there really is something for everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode.